Now, I've used that to help players, too. I've had guys that say, well, I'm a little over it, so I put the camera in a different position, and they're getting ready to go play a tournament, show them their swing, and they go, oh, I'm right on it. I go, hey, you're so good, it's incredible. They go play good. Okay, so a lot of this game and a lot of teaching, as we'll talk about the art of it, is getting the person in front of you to really feel good about what they're doing. But where the mat system has really helped me is there's no discussion here about where the camera should or shouldn't be. You're looking at a swing in three-dimensional. So you can see, whatever you want to see. There's no discussion for angles and where you think it's on plane, not on plane, whatever. You can see exactly where it's at. So that's been a huge, huge deal for me, and I think for our industry. And I think that's something that all of you, if you have the opportunity, should take a picture of your swing, look at it in your camera angle. If you can get to the mat system, see what it shows, you might be surprised that maybe what you're trying to fix, you don't need to fix. Like I say, I ruined a career or handicapped a career dramatically trying to fix something that wasn't broken. That's a pretty sick feeling after about 5 years of thousands of golf balls and who knows how much mental distress. So, anyways.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, that's a good point. So, how you set up your camera, but what happens with the mat system? It's calibrated to 0, so we know what 0 is. So, based on where the system knows where 0 is. So, based on where they stand, we know exactly what their path is. We don't tell them we obviously have a little target for them, but the system will tell us where they are off that 0 number, so we know what 0 is. So in terms of alignment, obviously the one thing I wanted to cover a little bit was posture. As we all know, some of us believe or don't believe is that posture, foundation, building a house is a pretty good way of starting off a good golf swing. So as we see here, just a few kind of alignment drills. Obviously, we know the tour pros have very good alignment. You see them every week on tour. Pretty much every practice session, they put something down to aid their alignment. And this just kind of proves how good their alignment are. In fact, some of the tour pros we've actually noticed a lot stand a little open. Now, let me give you a little bit of background actually about who this is. This composite is. This is a composite swing of all our tour pros. We've had thousands of tour players in there. Obviously, some are staff guys, some aren't staff guys anymore. But this is a kind of composite swing of those guys. So it gives us a good tour average of where these guys are. So you can see, obviously, they stand a little bit more open, certainly with the driver, than they do anything else. Hence why maybe, obviously, the ball's slightly more forward, but they do definitely stand slightly more open with the driver. So all those guys who are trying to kind of creep their shoulders back or anything like that, we actually find a lot of the tour players do stand open with the driver. Spine angle as well, obviously it's hard to see. You can maybe look at the buttons on someone's jersey, someone's shirt, to see how they angle behind the ball. Yeah, we all know that that's right with the driver, but they actually tilt behind the golf ball pretty much less than a degree different with the driver than they do with the 6-iron. And I don't have it on there, unfortunately I can't do 3 swings at most, but they also the same with the wedge as well. So what determines where they are relative to the ball is obviously the ball position. And then their torso tilt as well, so they actually tilt the whole torso, about 10-11 degrees behind, away from the target. So, so many pitfalls that I find when guys come in, when I've done fittings, I can just see them, they're wondering why they're drop kicking it or doing something, and they're trying to get more and more and more behind the ball. And I've seen some guys with like 20 degrees of spine tilt behind the golf ball, and no wonder they can't get back to it. So wonder why they top the ball and maybe do other things in their golf swing. So, the misconception that you really tilt behind the ball with the driver is only because it looks that way because of the ball position. And the mat system is able to quantify that. And that's the kind of same thing in terms of and there I've got a view of down the line. You'll see the next page is obviously you have a little bit more spine tilt over the golf ball, and that's obviously you can see there's a little bit more hip bend. So they actually do it more from the hips. This system measures the pelvic. We put a belt around your hip bones, so it actually measures how much they're actually bending their hips. So you'll see guys who may quantify certain positions. If they're slouching, we can actually tell them how much they're slouching because we have a baseline of really roughly what our hip bend, but what their hip bend should be or what ballpark they should be. But then we can also see if they've actually overdone it with actually bending more from their shoulders. Obviously, Mike will go more into that with injury prevention and all that kind of stuff. And making sure you can get in somewhat of a good position. Some people we understand can't get in that position, and Mike will actually go into that later on. But that just kind of shows we can actually tell people how they are and what posture they need to get into, ideally. The same thing, obviously, the next one is staying in posture on the way down. As you can see, their spine angle is staying relatively similar. We know, obviously, from video we can see that, but we can see how they actually managed to do that is that they actually let their left hip goes down 18 degrees from where it started. So, you know, they're able to stay more in posture because their pelvis has stayed on that angle initially, and their left hip has actually gone a lot lower to the ground. We see a lot of guys, I've seen a lot of guys on the mat system, and when you've shown them, and they're turning like this around and staying vertically upright, how can they get back to the ball? And I wonder why they top it, but they can understand actually their left hip needs to stay a little lower. Again, you obviously got to profile your clients to understand if they can actually physically get into that position. And obviously just kind of like a shoulder turn. We know all tour players can't turn, you know, all golfers can't turn that much. But we're able to actually tell them, quantify how much they are actually turning, and actually if they're turning behind the golf ball. How many of you guys have a camera in the ceiling? Nice, that's good. So there's 1 out of 120, 130. So cameras, has it proved useful for you, having a camera in the ceiling?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So with the mat system, obviously, just a roll of the mouse, we can then bring that view on top of them. And again, with the markers and with knowing what zero is, we can quantify how much they are turning, if they're turning efficiently. And so these are just some good, I've just printed out some data as well, put it in the bottom, just so you get an idea of what these tour pros or some of these guys are turning. So if you want to kind of use this as an example, I want to give you guys that information to use that. And then again, rotation into the golf ball as well, looking how they clear their hips, are they closed, are they open? Again, you know, there's a big debate is certain companies tell that the shoulders are open at impact, some people tell them they're a little shut. Again, it's like where you're measuring from and what is zero. So we have our idea of what they do, and other places have, other facilities, other manufacturers have similar ideas of what they do. But from what we see is obviously here with the iron and even with the driver, they are a little close, much more square with the driver. Probably the ball's obviously a little further forward, so a little more time to square up those shoulders. And this is a pretty good one as well. Again, we have a camera underneath. Funny story, actually. I was in a system, I was doing a session with a female who had a skirt on. And I flipped it underneath, and she crossed her legs like this, and oh my God, there's a camera in the floor. So I assured her that I didn't want to see anything, so apart from how I could make her a better golfer. So that was kind of a funny story. But again, by going underneath, we're able to see how center of gravity can work. And as you can see, the guy on the right in red is what the composite tour player is. And we see the center of gravity actually goes from right heel to left toe, and it stays quite continuous in a pretty nice straight line. It might curl a little bit as they kind of rest back on their heel at impact. But what we see countless times over and over again is the center of gravity looks like someone's on a heart monitor. You know, it's just like this back and forth, heel toe, heel toe. And you actually obviously see why they strike it heel toe on the club. So being able to actually show how center of gravity can actually work in their favor to improve the strike pattern is actually key, and that's what the mat system can do. Taking that a step further as well, you know, obviously, how can people improve their center of gravity? Well, obviously through good technique, but there's a way of actually maybe doing that these days now with technology through footwear. And I'm going to let Mike take over from there when it comes to footwear.
We've done a lot with testing people, just putting them in different platforms and different shoes, and see what happens to their balance and how they move and what that center of gravity does. It's incredible how much better they get when you put them on a platform that allows the foot to work correctly. Now, your foot, okay, is designed, if you took your hand like this and you put it here and you push down on it, when you push down, your fingers go like this. If you pushed on a table, this would happen. That's what your toes are supposed to do. So when you pressure your feet, your toes are supposed to go this way. Well, most of the shoes that have your foot like this, when you pressure down, you got one problem right there. Your foot can't work the way it's designed to work, so all the muscles in the base of the foot aren't activated. Now, the big reason that shoes had platforms was for what? Spikes, for traction. Well, now that they can put traction in shoes without the stability, you're actually going to be better off. We've seen a lot of things happen to people's balance and ability to hit the ball solid just by putting them in different shoe platforms. Okay, so you're going to see a lot about that. It's in every other sport they do it. Golf stayed away from it because it was a traction thing. But now, I mean, I wear these on a daily basis. There's no way you're getting me back into a really stiff-soled shoe. It never made sense to me before. I wore it because that's what you were supposed to wear. There is a stability story. Some of it, though, is force stability. And so what happens is it changes how the body reacts to ground forces. So when a person feels the ground correctly and their foot can react the way it's supposed to, it's amazing what they then adopt or adapt to in their swing and allow themselves to do. Balance is a huge deal. Your feet are your only contact with the ground. So the better contact we have with the ground and the better signals getting up into your body, the better balance and everything you're going to do is going to be. So it's going to be a big deal. You're going to see a lot of changes in all the companies in footwear.
Thanks, Mike. Thank you. So, as Mike said, so if we can help, one of the nice pieces of the puzzle as well is obviously getting people the right footwear, which you might see a big increase in improving their center of gravity and how they work through the golf ball. And I just kind of put this last one on as well in terms of arm angles, and then I'll open it up to the floor for questions. Everyone talks about straight left arm at the top of the golf swing. You hear it from everyone, or you hear it from the guys on the range or in their foursome. And actually, the mat system allows us to prove that the left arm actually doesn't stay straight. There's about 10 to 11 degrees of bend to the left arm at the top of the golf swing. And obviously, at a dress as well, they're not quite straight as well. I mean, if your arms just hang naturally, there's a slight bend to them as they are. But in terms of at the top of the golf swing, the left arm actually has about 10 degrees of bend in it. And as Mike was talking about it earlier with Mike, as soon as you start straight bending your left arm, injury prevention, and Mike can go a bit more into
the whole left arm thing is if you lock your left arm, so when people, it's probably one of the worst things that's ever been taught, is keep your left arm straight. Left arm stays fairly straight, but there's a lot of reasons it does. The leverage in your hands, your right arm pushing away. But this arm, as soon as somebody goes like this, the muscles to straighten this left arm now lock this shoulder joint. So now the only thing that can happen now, the only way this arm's going to move is the shoulder has to move with it. Well, that's what we struggle with most of these people that we see. They're so locked up that their left arm can't swing, rotate, move independent of this shoulder socket. So this turns into a lot of lack of speed, lack of lever, and also a lot of battering ram back into your shoulder, injury in the shoulder and neck. Well, this left arm is more of a rotator than it is a puller and a lock like this. That's a perception that people have had. And I used to look at Nicholas, and I saw him set up to the ball, and it looked like right before he hit it, he'd take the club away. So I went out and practiced that. Then I got to be around Jack. I said, Jack, I noticed when you get set up, you get all ready to go, and you lock that left arm. I don't lock my left arm. Yes, you do. No, I don't. Don't tell me what I do. Okay, so what do? Well, when he was a kid, he tended to turn this arm out this way, so he got the club behind him. So Grout taught him right before he got ready to hit it to turn his left elbow in, and that kept the club out in front of him. But there's no tension at all in Jack's left arm. Okay, so you got to be careful about some of the things that you see. But that left arm deal, this is a rotator. When it locks, this joint just became stable. It can only move like this. They have to move together. I'm sure you've never seen that on the range.
Thanks, Mike. And then as you can see there, obviously, if you look how it tracks the left arm and the right arm as it moves, and you can see along the bottom, the the left arm might straighten a little bit. About 0.4 to 0.5 in the golf swing's about just halfway back. So most golfers, good golfers, might get a little straighter in their left arm for that club to extend out a little bit. But as you can see, that right elbow is actually starting to bend. It actually bends, as we know, you see video at the top, nearly about 90 degrees. And as it comes down into impact, even at impact, they're not actually fully straight yet. They actually only fully both kind of get extended, or the right arm now gets fully extended about just past impact. Probably got just before the club's about 90 or parallel to the ground on the way through. So that's what we've seen, how good players and everything use their arms and use to talk about extension or or letting the left arm soften and right arm soften. We actually, again, it's all about quantifying what these guys do and trying to lay that message back to them, back to the people who want to listen. And then I just put, again, the next like 5 or 10 slides behind it, just for you to have in terms of what the average tour player does. And as I said, we've actually captured thousands of golf swings, hundreds of thousands of golf swings on here with very differing handicaps. So we've kind of had a look at what, different handicaps are kind of, in a way, kind of pigeonholed and doing. Obviously, we know that isn't always gospel. Just because you're a 15 handicap doesn't mean you're going to swing at this speed or your hand speed, but it gives you an idea of where they are. And you actually can see that, if you just turn over their average hand speeds, you can see, well, their hand speeds are all very, very similar. So, and when we measure hand speed, we're actually not measuring the rotation, we're actually measuring how fast the hands actually move forward. And you'll see, well, hold on a minute, their hand speed are around the same. But what we've got to look at is what their club head speed. Their hand speed relationship or ratio to their club head speed is lower. So a tour player might swing at 90, 91, 92 miles an hour, yet he has the same hand speed as a 15 to 20 handicap. But a 15, 20 handicap might swing on the average of like 78, 70, 73. So obviously from there, that just enables us that they are actually holding the lag through the golf ball, so they actually are a little bit more efficient. And you'll flip over, how much more are they actually leaning that shaft forward at impact, shaft angle impact? About 3 degrees. So at impact, the shaft is leaning about 9.3 degrees ahead of the ball at impact, or leaning towards the ball, past the ball at impact. And even in the driver, there is actually a positive shaft lean even with the driver. Still hitting a little on the up, but that's why their launch conditions are quite good. That's why they obviously still launch it pretty good and still generate low spin. They keep the loft down. They actually put a loft down, 9-degree driver down about 6.5, 7 on our map system. So that's kind of just like nice, useful information for you to kind of understand. Some players might think, oh, well, how good am I? I'm not very good. I'm a 15 handicap. Well, I swing it at 85 miles an hour. Well, hey, you got potential. You got speed more than the average 15 handicap. How are you? You inside to out? Yeah, you are. But how much? Well, that's pretty good. It's tour average. What's your club face? Well, that's pretty much the number one thing that we see the problem is, which I'm sure you guys all know, that through the match system and everything else, we've again quantified that, yeah, the ball reacts 4 times greater to the club face. So, again, a lot of emphasis is on club face in order to actually improve people's golf. So I'll open up the floor to you. Obviously, that's just a little bit. Yes, sir.
Can you explain the face angle averages, the plus and
yeah, of course. Yeah, sorry. So we measure club faces being positive and positive being open and negative being closed. So this is kind of obviously more talking into the ball flight laws. Where are we? So we can see here. Okay, perfect. So we know what 0 is in the match system. So we then know what the target is. So the target at impact for tour players is a positive 0.7 degrees. Okay, so to targets, their club face is 0.7 degrees. Okay, open. But obviously, if you take in consideration what their path is, and their path might be coming 2 degrees, I think it's 2.1 inside to out. Their club face, in theory, then is closed to the path 1.4 degrees negative. So people say, oh, I can hit a draw from an open club face. Well, you can if that club face is open to the target, not necessarily open to the path. So that's how it's measured. So again, you can see that, for example, that you can see the higher the handicap goes, their target actually, they're trying to close it as much as they can, because they might toe it in more at address. So at address relative to target, it might be closed, but because they come predominantly more across the golf ball, that kind of cancels that out, and in fact they're 1.5 degrees open, so that's why the ball will still fade. And then taking into consideration where we know they hit it on the face more, they hit it more out towards the toe as well, which can lead to a little twist, and you'll see the face spin open. It's actually pretty cool showing that on that system. We can actually go above, and frame by frame, they can understand what happens when the club hits the ball and show you how the club actually twists at impact. And then they wonder why their gloves are all rubbing out because they hit it on the center and rip off, there goes the glove. So that's pretty cool thing to show people at impact to understand. You'll have people. Sorry, excuse me. Go ahead.
How long do these sessions usually last? If you went to do like an hour, 2 hours, like how long does it take?
Well, if you want to kind of get the full bag,
Yeah.
I would go 2 to 2.5 hours that we kind of do. Again, you know, if you want to come yourself, there's ones right here in the desert. And if you want to come with your student, that's a great 2.5 hours to work you and watching the fit go ahead, but also doing the swing analysis part for them. It would be lovely if obviously when the guy came for a fitting, when the fitting was happening, if every instructor could come. Obviously, that's hard to do, to obviously make sure. There's always that question, isn't it? How do we fit golf clubs? Which way do we go with fitting? And Greg will go more into that. But we can break it down as much as you want. They do an hour and a half if you just want to do like woods or just irons. Putting is an hour, and that's something I didn't touch on either. We also it's a whole game system, so it actually is calibrated to do putting as well. So the same data you see here, we actually have for putting as well, and we also can then show you the roll of the ball. We can show you how it's launching, when does it get pure roll, that kind of stuff as well. What's your shaft angle address compared to impact? What's your base angle from address? How is it affected at impact? So all these things that we can actually measure in order to understand how people can improve their game. Any more questions?
What's the impact location?
Okay, so yeah, giving you a little bit more information about that. So if you just say like the center of the club face is 0, okay? And negative means that it's, if you look on the heel to toe, that's the last page, guys, if you want to know. If you look at the negative means it's more towards you, so it's negative, it's coming to me. So obviously you can see tall player hits it 0.02 of a millimeter towards the heel on average, whereas the high handicap are hitting it 5 millimeters towards the toe, positive. Hence one of the reasons why they lose it right a lot. If you see how a club twists and hit off the toe, you can go off to the right. And then again with the tall player, again you can see with the driver that's quite dramatic, isn't it? You can see obviously they hit it a lot more towards the heel, and again the driver is positive out towards the toe. So kind of going back to what T.O. says, that enables us to why this, you know, this a speed pocket, I keep calling it speed slot, so I'm going to get fired now. Speed pocket, and obviously our inverted cone technology has really helped golfers to maximize these off-center hits, and you can see it can get quite diverse actually, so where they strike the golf ball. But so if you just think negative is towards the heel, positive towards the toe, and if you go up and down, negative is down and positive is up. So again, you know, high handicapped golfers tend to hit it a lot more down towards the sole of the golf club. As we all know, they like to pit, don't take too much of the divots, and the thin top the golf ball a little bit more than the backs. So, yes, sir.
Angle of attack? Is there
Yeah, angle attack should be on there as well. It should be up pass. That's what we call it as.
Okay.
So up pass. You can see on average, tall players actually hit down the ball. I think about. Did it get on there? Should be.
Yeah. Second to left.
Yeah, on the back of one of the sheets, on the back of face angle averages. Yeah, on average, tall players with the iron hit about 3.7 degrees down the golf ball. With a wedge, it's not on there. With a wedge, it's about 7. And we use actually a 56-degree wedge to measure that. And then obviously hit a little bit upwards on the drive, about 3 degrees.
Hey, Chris, I think a good thing to note is, you know, we get some slightly different numbers with our mat system versus a launch monitor. You know, with the mat system, we're actually tracking the real device, the real unit. It's censored. We see it in space 100%. Where with a launch monitor, that visual actually happens from about 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock, but it actually is kind of a blob of a picture. You don't really have the precise data that's attached to it like the mat system. So we get slightly different numbers with the mat system on angle of attack. Normally it's a little bit shallower than what I would see with the TrackMan or with the flight scope, and I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later.
Yeah, but as Greg, right, if anyone's going to ask that, you know, I've used all the launch monitors known to man, and I've seen some difference certainly in the upward path. But I'm still a firm believer in the mat system because we're measuring the entire club. We know what 0 is, we calibrate the room, we're measuring the entire golf club from start to finish. So I'm a quite firm believer in this rather than maybe sometimes what some of the other modifiers can do. And then again, obviously it's not on here, but putting has a tendency to hit up on the golf ball more. It's not on here, but they hit up on the ball. And if you guys need that information, we can provide that. I'm sure we can send that. We can send it to the Southern California PGA, and they can distribute that. But I have a tendency to hit definitely about 1 to 3 degrees up on the golf ball, and the loft is around 3 degrees on average if they start at a 4-degree loft. So they generally take about 1 degree of loft off the putter and hit up the ball 3 or 4 degrees. Excuse me, 2 to 3 degrees. One of the guys that is a big ambassador of ours is Mr. Stockton, and his numbers are off the chain. Obviously, he actually hits up on the golf ball 8 degrees, and his lofted impact is -2. So he actually put a good player, tall player, will put 30 to 40 RPMs of top spin on the golf, revolutions, or get to pure roll, have about 30, 40 RPMs. Dave Stockton gets about 150, so as soon as that ball takes off, it's gone. And that's why he holds a lot of putts, because if you can keep on that same axis rolling, it can hold its line a lot better, and hence why he holds a lot of putts, just because how purely that ball rolls. Anything else, guys? Yes, sir.
I think you guys made a really good point about being aware of what system you're measuring with, so you can measure apples to apples.
Yes, sir.
Taking your data and looking at it, TrackMan data versus an AMM data.
Yes.
Everything's going to be different. It doesn't mean one thing's wrong with it.
No, exactly right. Yeah, it's again what you're measuring. There are some. If we go back to some launch monitors when it comes to do with putting, and we have putting as well. It depends. They're actually all very, very accurate in terms of what they measure, but it's what zero is. It's what they measure it from. So they'll all tell you that he's coming a little bit more outside than where it measured to. So they're all very, very accurate these days. But it's again what Mike said. It's depending on how you set it up, and if you have any of these launch monitors, teaching devices, or fitting devices, be sure to make sure that you actually get them calibrated. A lot of some can be calibrated online. They can send you downloads to recalibrate them, to get you the new fresh uploads. And I just really, really, really advise you to keep doing that to make sure your systems are all up to date. Because if it's slightly off, 1 degree, 2 degrees, or slightly off, might not be as accurate as you think it's going to be. But as long as you can get them calibrated and know exactly where you're lining them up, maybe etch something on the floor and know where you're going to set it up every time, that'll make your lives a lot easier. I think we're done.
Good stuff,
Yeah.
I mean, fish. So
There you
I'm
go.
thinking
All right,
teal.
guys.
Teal
Thanks
as
very
well.
much for your ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Fish. All right, so we want to kind of move into some of the technology, and obviously what technology can do with a golfer's swing. We all know for the most part that technology has changed the way players strike the golf ball. It's changed the golf swing a little bit, especially at the top level. And I'm going to bring up Tio to talk a little bit on where we've been with past designs, present designs, and future designs, and kind of get a little more interactive and show you really some of the benefits of what the new technology can do with the launch monitor, and we'll hit some shots. So, Tio, you want to get started? I'll get the launch monitor going here. Yeah, let's do some iron stuff.
I think the irons are out. Somebody's out hitting them on the range, right?
Somebody put them in the bag.
Always
already.
in the
It's like these tour players, just always walking away with clubs. Super. Thank you. All right, so as we already talked, again, we're very excited about changing the dynamic of what irons do, especially the player's iron. And what we're going to have Greg do is we're going to have him hit some shots. We're going to start off with the MC, which is our current iron. And these all have the same shafts, same length, same swing weight, grip, etc. And we're just going to read off some numbers and show you what he does with them in terms of performance. We'll expect to see the MC product, and then moving to the tour iron will be a couple yards further, not drastically longer, but it should be a lot more consistent, and it should come down a little bit steeper. Okay, and then we'll go to the market iron, which the market iron will definitely go farther, but it should have good launch conditions, good landing angle, and a ball flight that a player of Greg's caliber would say, that looks like it should be flying like a forehand. It'll just go a lot longer. And in the meantime, did you have any more questions about the irons now that you got to see them all, look at them all, touch and feel them? Any more thoughts, questions? Oh, we got my half iron there, perfect. Okay, question.
Cut iron.
Mm-hmm. Well, usually the inverted cone, the idea here is the center of the face is thicker. What you're trying to do is, we go back to this thing, right? When you make an iron that's a consistent thickness, what you get is this kind of ball speed off the face. What you're actually trying to do a little bit is take an iron like, what this iron really is an iron like, that would be this tight, up higher, and we actually slow down the middle. So what an inverted cone does is it slows down the middle to bring it within the limit, but also to spread out that curve. So that's why it's a little bit thicker, and if you look at all of our metal woods are the same way. I have a metal wood cross section here as well. Then you can see in pretty good detail the same thing. It's fairly thick in the center. And what that does is it slows down that middle point so it's not as hot. Remember, this driver, if we made this driver, and Frank Thomas talked to you guys earlier, probably talked to you about the COR rule, this driver without an inverted cone would probably be 860 right now, or higher, for the speed off the face. But by design, we actually slow down the middle. The structure of the head itself is determined by how thin these corners are, how thin the bottom is, and all that structure there also affects the speed. So with drivers, we slow them all down in the middle. By slowing them down in the middle, you get a wider sweet spot. That was exciting.
What was the COR on these guys?
That was about 700. You gonna hit some of that?
We might show a couple of launch conditions.
So that's why it's thicker in the middle. But the overall structure, you see how thin it is outside here, and how the pocket helps you as well. That whole structure gives you. You're welcome.
Give me a couple seconds here.
Okay. Now, one of the things, and we'll talk about that a little bit before he gets there, is this is the cutaway of the fairy wood. Now, fairy woods, this is the rocket balls, we're not at the speed limit. This one is about 805 on a rocket ball, 805 to 810. And you can see it's constant wall thickness, because we're not fast enough to be able to slow it down. So when Benoit Vincent, who's our chief technology officer, you ask him, what do we do next? And he's French, so he has a little French accent, which I can't do very well. But he says, we will stop when we have to put inverted cone in fairy woods, because they're not fast enough yet. So our goal is, how can we get them up to the limit, and then beyond the limit. Once we get them beyond the limit, we'll put inverted cone in, slow down the middle, and spread it out. So you can predict what we're going to do in fairy woods for the next 3 to 4 years, is trying to get it faster and faster. But the same challenge from a structural standpoint. An interesting thing we do in engineering is, this was an old Harley-Davidson model and a little bit of a joke. What they would say is, if it doesn't work, make it thicker. If it works, chrome it. So whenever you talk to an engineer, first level engineers, you get out of school and you try and make a structure last longer. If it breaks, you just make it thicker. So that does a lot of things, but it's a pretty simple concept to think about. So what we try and do is, same thing here, is if it's too fast, make it thicker. The structure is, you want to make it thinner on the edges, so now it has more of a trampoline effect for the middle section. And a trampoline, interestingly enough, when you think about a trampoline kind of works like this, right? It's got the most spring in the middle, and not so much spring on the edges. So we're actually trying to make a flattened trampoline, if you will. All right.
I've got 120 teachers here to give me a tip on my golf swing, so
Well, we saw it earlier. It wasn't that bad. Let's go with the MC first.
all right, so we're going to hit our current MC.
Those are all those divots from about
I've already
22
hit 40
shots.
shots. You can't even. I'm a superintendent string. Just curious, how many of you have launch monitors and utilize launch monitors? Say about 5%, 10% of you. Obviously, it's a huge advantage and a tool to have a launch monitor when you're working with players, not only from a fitting standpoint, but from an instructional standpoint. And I think our goal today is to help you see what the numbers are and how that correlates visually, because if you don't have a launch monitor, I know you all have a good understanding of what proper ball flight technically looks like, but it's amazing how far off a lot of people really understand what spin and angle of descent and all the important variables of getting proper ball flight, what they look like. So we'll spit out numbers and help you make sense of them visually.
What about, how many of you have something that just shows club head speed, ball speed? Do you have anything that, I mean, you don't have to have the whole TrackMan or all that, but you have, how many, raise your hand, how many have that? I would suggest strongly, and we'll talk about it in a minute, that you can get things like that for a couple $100 that'll give you club head speed and ball speed. Close enough for what we'll talk about in a minute. That's a very important thing relative to efficiency, which we'll talk about here in a minute. And from a teaching perspective, trying to get your students to focus on what's really valuable for them, that's critical, because they're going to trust technology more than they're going to trust you. That's unfortunate, but that just happens to be what it is. Oh, it's a ground.
This is ground.
Okay. That's better. Pretty solid there.
Yep. Solid.
And that's the standard MC4 iron. He's going to hit that 190 in the air. It's going to come down. Where's our descent angle? Ball speed was 131.7 miles an hour, so pretty consistent with what he would hit that club. Yeah, perfect. Okay. All right. And we'll go right to the new Rocket Blades Tour. So remember that number, 190. Ball speed was 131.7. Launch angle 14, spin 4,600. Rate solidness to thinness on that.
That's probably about as solid, maybe a little bit more speed.
Okay. So that's 194, 134 ball speed, 13-degree launch, 4,800. So he picked up a few yards, about 4 yards, right? And a little bit of ball speed. And that was a decent hit.
Yep.
Probably about what the quality was of the previous one.
I'll take that as a working guy.
Okay. That was a little miss hit.
You know, the one important thing to understand when you're utilizing a launch monitor out on a range, it's important to realize what golf ball you're hitting. Typically, you know, you have two-piece, low-spin golf balls on the range, and that definitely affects spin rates and launch angles, and not as much speed, but definitely spin rates and launch angles. So, you know, the more that you can test, you know, when you get to a final test with a good player, a golf ball that has a little bit more feel, a little bit more spin, you're going to get a much more indicative ball flight, obviously, out there. When you have such low spin golf balls, typically you're going to see, you know, these low spin shots, and you're going to feel like you have to go up with loft for a lot of guys to get more spin, especially on drivers. But then when he gets out there with a spinnier golf ball, all of a sudden the guy's spinning it through the roof. So just, you know, keep that in mind when you're working with players. Question in the back.
I thought I read somewhere that it was better to hit off a lie board.
Off of a lie board?
Is it divot?
Yeah, I just don't see how, you know, hitting off of a lie board really resembles what you're going to do playing golf.
Neither did I. It's just why I was telling you what I read.
Yeah, I mean, it makes the contact clean, but as you all know, when you hit off of a lie board, what does the guy do? He hits it straight up in the air, easy to hit, can't miss the shot. It's like hitting off of a mat. So to me, that's not really a good indicator of what's truly going on at impact.
All right. Okay, we'll go to the next. Well, we want to go the full. This is the full dosage. So remember, he was about 4 yards longer with the tour iron versus the MC. How'd that feel?
Pretty solid.
Okay.
Turned it over just a little bit.
Just a shade.
Spin came down a little bit, but
210. 210, 137.6 ball speed. So that's almost 6 miles an hour more than the standard MC.
Yep.
And about 3 miles an hour more. And in general, again, that was a pretty solid hit, but I think I need to hit one really good this time. Just see where you can hit it.
you're asking a lot.
Remember, 210, he was 190 to 194.
What was the spin rate?
Spin rate was about 3,600 on that.
And I'll go over kind of what optimum spin rates are that we see with PGA Tour, Club Pros, and LPGA to give you kind of a, I have that on your handout so that you can make reference to that.
Another good one there.
2 more years to the senior tour.
207. So again, really good shots there in terms of what you would see from a good player with that club with a 4-iron. Now, remember, when you talk to the different golfers, there's going to be certain golfers that are going to say, okay, well, I don't really need the clubs to go that far. I'm going to take the trade-off of playability for the blade shape, the sole, the workability over the pure distance. The good player who's looking for that consistent shot that gets up a little bit easier, comes down a little bit steeper, you're going to give him 4 yards, but you're going to give him shots that are a lot more consistent. And like we mentioned, you throw a blanket over the shots that he's going to hit. So that's the difference in terms of the technology. Is we're trying to design irons that you can get up easier in the air and come down steeper, because that's the change to the golf ball over the years. Golf balls have gotten less spinny in the last 10 to 15 years. So you really need a club that helps it get it up in the air a lot better. And for the average amateur, that's a huge benefit for those kind of golf clubs.
Okay. Questions on, yes, a couple.
Is the loft the same on all those?
Okay, that's a good question. I knew it would happen sometime or another. The loft on the standard club is a little bit stronger because this has a lower center of gravity. This has 17 grams we've taken out of the shape and put it lower. When you lower the center of gravity, the ball automatically goes up. And when we looked at those ball flights, so they didn't look drastically different in terms of height. In fact, I would say you couldn't tell, other than the speed being different, that they were the different flight going out. And when you think about the ball flight going out, is if we can get you more speed, remember how you see the ball going out this way? You're seeing the angle and you're seeing the peak height. Okay, if I can get you more speed with a lower angle but about the same spin, it's going to have the same peak height. So we actually designed the irons to have the same peak height, even though the lofts themselves are differently. Some people said, well, you just strengthen your lofts, right? But what would happen if I just strengthened my lofts and did nothing different? Where would the ball go? It would go down here instead of up here. Okay, so you can't really strengthen your loft unless you create this first. Okay, and again, remember your visual perception is I'm looking here, I'm looking out, I'm going to see peak height, and I'm going to see the speed. Okay, so that's why you say, okay, yeah, they're a little bit stronger, but in general, if I made this the same loft as that, where would the ball flight go? It would go straight up in the air and would be a lot worse ball flight. Most golfers would see that and say, ooh, that's too high, I can't play that. And we've made some irons like that. Like typically when we make our max irons, we bias those for the height because that's usually a slower swing speed golfer who's just looking to get up in the air. So we get everything up in the air. But if you give that to a player like Greg, he would say that's way too high for that club. So these will be about 2 to 3 degrees stronger per club than the tour irons. The tour irons are very comparable lofts to what we make now in MC.
Did you feel it was you had to compromise to lose the weight port in the back in the new club, or was it not effective enough?
So that was a good question. In fact, Greg asked me that on the way over. He said, what happened to the weight port? One of the things we found that the trade-off for the speed and the consistency that you get with the new design with the speed pocket was more beneficial overall in terms of performance than the benefit you get from the CG change. So it's great for fitting. One of the great things that it is good for is fitting post-assembly. But with this design, we're finding much more consistency and benefit that way. You have to do a little bit more work as a club builder to get it right. But we know how to do that. The industry knows how to do that. So we've gone back to a more traditional in the hosel system. But that was the one trade-off we had to make. We said, okay, we can give you a lot more area of fast ball speed, a lot more consistent shots, or we can give you a little benefit from a club making standpoint.
Tio mentioned how much weight it really takes to move the CG in any significant distance to affect ball flight.
Yeah, so when you think about drivers versus irons, right? So a driver, we have a driver head that weighs just over 200 grams, and we can take that movable weight and move 9 grams of weight, a 10 versus a 1, right? So you're 9 effective movement. That moves the ball flight about 20 yards on a driver. Let's say it's a 250-yard drive. Okay, so that's about the ratio. Now my driver head is 200. But my 3-iron head is probably 240. As I get down to my lower irons, you're up to 300 grams. So you got a lot heavier head weight, and you have a lot less weight that you can move. So if you think about what's in one of these cartridges, we usually range these cartridges from about 2 to 10 grams. So I'm talking about 8 grams range. And again, remember, when I always build one with it in there. So I'm never at 0. So I'm actually probably, instead of 2 to 8, I'm probably averaging 6. And my range off of 6 is plus or minus 4. So I'm changing the weight plus or minus 4 on this head to a place over here that's going to be about plus or minus 4 as well. And in reality, I'm not affecting it nearly as much as I could a driver.
Was the intent of the port to move the CG? Wasn't it?
No, it wasn't. We designed the entire weighting so the CG is still in the center of this design relative to this design. It's just we have a little variation here versus here. Right? So it's a different variation, but it's a very small variation. It's plus or minus 3 grams on a head that's somewhere between 250 and 300. So it's a very small difference. It is beneficial, but the speed payoff was better.
Other than loft, and I see this a lot in the more forgiving clubs, the spin rates drop dramatically from, say, the Tour, which was about 4,600, I believe,
Well,
and then went to that, which was 3,600. On Tour average, to your point, better players want more control.
Exactly.
So a 4-iron Tour average spin rate's about 4,800, right around there. So 3,600 would definitely not be for that better player. So
Correct.
what is it other than loft that affects the spin rate that much? Even, you know,
The majority of it is the loft. Again, we're talking 3 degrees on
1,000
that.
RPM.
Yep.
Gotcha.
but a lot of it has to do with angle of attack, too. I'm pretty shallow. I've never been a high spin guy, so I fight sometimes not getting enough spin. You know, and it also comes down to playable trajectories, especially when you get to long irons. It's so important to have the right amount of spin, but it's also important to have the right angle of descent, and that's what we're seeing with these new iron designs, is that we can launch it up high without the spin, but it's still coming down on a decent angle where it's going to stop relatively, you know, on a green. So playable angles of descent are huge, and when I'm fitting our top players, I'm definitely looking at that number for the most part when you start getting into the 4-irons, into gap fitting, into hybrids, into fairways, and especially into drivers, and I'll go into that a little bit more, but you know, the old misnomer about we just want to launch it as high as possible with lower and lower spin is not necessarily always good, especially when you get to the driver, because you know, if you have a ball coming down like this with the driver, even though it has very minimal amount of spin, under 2,000, is it going forward when it lands? No, it's not. So there is a point of no return where just launching it high with low spin is not necessarily going to benefit the overall distance number.
And one of the things we learned this year, wasn't surprising to us too much, was rocket balls rescues on tour. In general, weren't really played by a lot of tour players for 2 reasons. One is they went too far, and the second reason is they were too high. And if you're looking at that elite player who's looking for the vertical descent angle and a gap, those clubs weren't as well liked as our previous Rescue 11 that we made. So we have a majority of those in play versus the rocket balls. And some things we're learning as we make these higher COR clubs. We actually had a lot of guys have success instead of going with the 3 rocket balls rescue, going to a 4. Because it's a similar idea where you can get more loft, more spin rate, and that helps you bring the ball down a little bit steeper. And we talked a little bit, Tom mentioned some numbers before on drivers. When you think about drivers, what's happened over the years is drivers have gotten lower spinning by design because that's how you make them go farther, given that you have a USGA limit. So how do you get the ball to go farther? You either got to get more speed, higher launch, or less spin. So if you can't get the guy to swing faster and you can't get the head to go faster, you're left with launch angle and spin rate. And what we do then is we make the driver spin lower, we make the ball spin lower. So when we talk about a large percentage of golfers that come into the match system not being fit for enough loft, It's because they may have been fit for enough loft 3 years ago when they had their last driver, but now that everything spins lower, they don't have the right loft anymore. And we find that the best way to do that is to get them more loft. So that's where you see things with hosels and sleeve adjustability be really beneficial, because the guy may say, I've been a 9.5 guy all my life. And I can tell him, for the most part, he's probably not a 9.5 guy with the new equipment. Because we have golf balls now that fly very well at 1,600 RPM to spin with an LDP dimple pattern. And that never used to be the case. You could never get a golf ball to fly that well at low spin rates. We have drivers now that are 300, 400, 500 RPMs lower than drivers we had 3 or 4 years ago. So to maximize your distance, you got to get the ball up in the air higher, which means loft, or swing differently, which is way harder. So what we recommend to all players is make sure you get that fitting with the modern equipment you're going to use. And when we look at our numbers, about 80% of golfers that come into the mat system at Kingdom, they have the wrong loft. 80%. Now, you wouldn't think it would be nearly that high, because a lot of people are getting fit nowadays, but the equipment has changed. And our holy grail, we kind of call it, the number 17 had a big relevance to us this year, obviously. But our holy grail of the numbers is 17-17. If we can get the golfer launching at 17 degrees and 1,700 spin, do you think he's going to hit it farther than he hits it now? A lot farther. So we believe, even with the USGA limits, that in drivers, if we can get equipment that does that better, that is going to get better performance and more distance for golfers. But we got to get people out of this mindset is I need a 9.5 driver. Okay? I want to take the loft off of drivers. Because I don't think people should know, because it's not good for them to know. What's good for them to know is for you to get fit, you to go fit them and say, here's how you need to hit the ball. And we all know in the past 10 years, if you watch the elite players, the ball flight of the elite players has changed. When you watch some of these guys that hit it now, Dustin Johnson and Kenny Perry was notable for years of having great ball flight. 15 to 17 degree launch angles and 2,000 RPMs or less spin. Those guys that always hit it the longest on tour have those kind of numbers. So as a goal, as an industry, we're trying to design equipment that is easier to do that. So that means lower center gravities and more loft. From a fitting standpoint, we've got to be talking more loft all the time. Now, there's a few guys, Bill mentioned before, hey, I'm spinning it too much. We know there's a pyramid of golfers out there that sometimes they do have that problem, so that's why adjustability is so key to do all that.
That's a great segue, Tio, into talking about fairways and what we've seen in general since we came out with the Rocket Ball fairways. Because they, on average, a tour player spins a fairway before Rocket Ball somewhere in the mid 3,000s, launching it anywhere from 9 to 11. We've been seeing the launch conditions with the Rocket Ball's fairways go up about a degree, but the spin rate has been the big story of what it's doing. We're down in the low 3,000s now with spin. So the movement out on tour and the movement fitting that we've seen is, the guys start off with their typical 14.5 or 13.5 type of loft out there, and they can't control the shot. It's coming off too hot, too low spin, and we've worked a fair amount of tour players up into the 16-degree range on 3-woods. Now I have just a stock 15-degree head here, and then I have a 4-wood at 17.5. And we've seen a lot of guys go with the 4-wood lofts as their 3-woods now because the spin rates are not getting above 3,500.
Exactly, Greg. That's a great point. One of the things that we talk about, and he and his dad know it well, back in the old days of wooden heads, when these were the drivers, the loft of a fairway wood was 16 degrees. We knew back then that you need loft on a fairway wood. It's the hardest shot in golf, a long club off the ground. So how do you get them up in the air? You give them more loft. So when you think about what we're doing now, the change in golf is we're able to reduce the spin rate. In the old fairway wood model, good players would take that fairway wood, and some of them, Greg's numbers were actually conservative. If you look at a player like a Justin Rose or some of these other guys, you're talking 4,300 RPM to spin on a 3-wood. What does that shot look like? It looks like this, because the launch angle is about 7 degrees. And when you can change them to performance of a fairway wood that has a lower CG and more speed and the weight forward, you can actually get them to be about 10-degree launch angle and about 35 to 3,100 RPM to spin. When you talk about Rocket Ball's distance, we did the 17-yard claim, and we got a little flack from that in the industry, but that 17-yard claim was a conservative legal claim. we actually had data that said it was over 20 yards. But we had to go 17 because advertising, both on TV and in magazines, has to go by a 95% statistical confidence level. So that means to claim 17, you actually have to have 21. So in our data, we had 21, and we were able to claim 17. But of that 17, 7 of it was from faster speed, 10 of it was from reduced spin rate. So the same conversation we had with the irons and the driver is, now to get you the ball flight that's normal, you got to get more loft. And when we looked at all kinds of good players on the match system, we looked at tour players, we found that regardless of skill level, how you attack the ball is how you need to define what the loft of your 3-wood is. For instance, Dustin Johnson uses that club, the 16.5. Dustin Johnson is one of the longest hitters in the game, right at the top of the pyramid. But he needs more loft on his 3-wood because of the angle of attack and how he hits the shot. So we found in general, what we launched this year with the Rocket Balls was a 3 and a 3HL. Prior to that, in the product line, we called it a 3 and a 4. And you had to be pretty sophisticated to either remember a 4 or know that you needed a 4 instead of a 3. And we tried to make that just a little bit easier, say you really need to get the 3HL. This year, when we looked at how many of the Rocket Ball Sperry-Wood we sold, about 20% of those were 3HLs, and about 50% of those were 3s. And I believe in about 3 years, we'll see that percentages flip-flop. Because what we're doing is we're designing the head to have less spin rate. That's how it goes further. We can't, after getting up to the speed limit in the next couple years, we won't be able to go faster. So we have to design it to go farther by reducing spin rate, which means more loft to get it up in the air and have it come down steeply.
Do you think it's a coincidence that golf balls and club design have kind of paralleled each other? I'm going to go ahead and hit a Mario special here from my college days, if I can find the face and it doesn't break, but just to prove to you that golf ball technology has definitely mirrored golf club design technology. I've got about a 10.5-degree driver here, even a graphite shaft, so it's pretty modern and a persimmon.
That was a little silly, wasn't it?
Yeah.
What is that?
Hold on.
This spin rate about 700.
Now, if I had a Bellata ball there, you wouldn't even hear impact. At least you can hear it now, but
That carried 200 and rolled out to 229. That was almost just a little longer than that 4-iron. Spin rate was 1900 on this one. The last one was 1200.
so give me a Bellata with spin that launches higher and spins more, and I'm going to get 20 more yards to carry out of that.
We had a story in the beginning. Mike actually has a daughter in college. You want to tell that? You want me to tell it?
My daughter'd never seen persimmon. She just started playing golf in her junior year of high school. So last year we were out on the range and she was complaining about whatever club she was trying to hit. So the next day I went back in my closet and grabbed my old McGregor Iomatic driver. So we got out there and she started hitting balls and she was, this and that and the other, about to fix this, fix that. I said, why don't you try this one? And she set it down and she goes, what's this? I said, well, that's what I grew up with. Let's see you hit that one. And I mean, it was low left. She couldn't get it in the air. She goes, I wouldn't even play with it. You can't play with it. Well, yes and no. The ball doesn't fit it, but it's made it. I mean, when you do that and you hit it, you can see just what technology has done in the last 20 years. I mean, it's changed the game. The ball and the club, it's unbelievably different. Like I say, a lot of these kids now, they've never persimmon. What's persimmon? That's just put furniture polish on or something. They even know what that is. Whipping on the club. You got to be kidding me. So it was interesting to see her perception. She was very happy with going back to that.
My dad still has a permanent indentation in his thumb from whipping clubs for 50 years.
Yeah.
It'll never go away.
Wow.
But the opposite's true, that if I got a very spinny ball, an old Bellata, with a modern head design, you're going to see a ball flight that technically is not very controllable because it launches high and spins too much. So they've married each other nicely, the development.
Why don't you go hit some 3-woods with those two
Yeah.
different 3-woods? So I'll pass this part around. I got another half head. This shows the rocket balls now. The crown on this club is 0.4 to 0.6 millimeters thick, and it's got all the weight front load with the speed pocket. So by design, we're going to get the ball up in the air, faster speed, and we're lowering that crown weight. So that's overall what fairway have done the last couple of years is continue to lower that weight. That's after hitting that first sentence.
All right, next.
All right, 234, good launch, 10 degrees, about 4,000 spin. What we found on tours, there's really two types of players, and it's hard to figure out who's in which camp. But there are guys like Dustin and a few other guys that love the distance we can get, but they dial it back. They go to a 4-wood or they go to a 5-wood because they're looking both for a gap and a club they can hit certain distances and certain shots. There are other players, guys like Paul Goydos, Justin Leonard, a few other guys, you'd call them the shorter hitters, but they're taking rocket balls the standard 15 they always played, and they're taking the 20-plus yards they're getting out of it. So the nice thing about the breakthrough in equipment that you're seeing is it gives players choices about how they want to set up their bag. And the one challenge we had, especially with the longer guys, when they came in and said, some of these rocket balls fairways go almost as far as drivers. And it was a little bit of a challenge for them to figure out how they're going to take the technology and use it to their most benefit. Like I said, though, most of the guys are saying, I'm going to take this club and bring something in steep, because if I'm going for a par 5, I want a shot that comes down and lands. Whereas the other players, like most amateurs, are saying, I'm just taking the distance all I can get. So the nice thing about the breakthrough in technology is you have more choices now for the equipment market out there.
What was the difference, Greg?
So I launched the two 17.5 heads about 1.5 degrees to 2 degrees higher, but my spin rate was the same. If anything, it came down about 700-800 RPMs.
And what about carry?
So from a carry standpoint, really was about the same amount of carry, but it was a heck of a lot easier to hit, and it didn't balloon up in the air for me.
And your landing angle is a little steeper, right, for the 4.
Yeah.
So that's the trade-off you get with the benefit in technology, because we knew that you can make a club really go far just by making the loft stronger, but golfers need it to be easy to hit and get up in the air. And so what we try to do with rocket balls, and what you're seeing a lot of the other companies like Adams do, is getting clubs that are easier to hit in the air and go farther. So you don't have to make that trade-off. In the old days, when it was easy to hit in the air, it was spinny, and therefore for a good player it would be short and you'd lose control of it. Nowadays, with the lower spin rates, you can get the best of both worlds.
Okay. Questions? All right. Well, probably what I want to cover a little bit now is really what I typically do when I work with players when they come into the kingdom and working with staff guys. I think everybody is pretty familiar with what type of optimal launch conditions are needed for drivers. But when you start getting into the hybrids and the fairways, and especially the irons, that gets a little bit fuzzier. And obviously at the Kingdom, I have a pretty large selection of clubs to fit with. But I'm a big and firm believer that really it's all about ball flight. That if I can get a good player to optimize his ball flight with launch and spin and efficiency, he's pretty much going to get the maximum distance and maximum consistency out of his game. With irons, usually when I get a player in, I'm going to test a full representation of their whole bag. It's important that I see what the short irons do, what the middle irons do, and what the long irons do. Because, you know, if I just see a player hit a 6-iron, that doesn't really tell me whether he's got playable trajectories and efficiency in his 4-iron. And the opposite's true, where I want to see what the guy does with short irons, because typically the guy's spin rate and launch conditions are good in the middle part of his bag. When I get to a 9-iron, I might see a completely different story. He might spin that and balloon that a lot, and I think you see that with a lot of good players, is that there's a certain part of their bag that they really swing well at, and then there's other parts that they struggle with. So the most important thing that I do is I get the guy's clubs in, I check his lofts, I check his lie angles, I make sure that I know where my starting point is. Because with lofts today, they're all over the place. You could have weak lofts, strong lofts, and that really, as T.O. and we believe, that affects spin rate probably the most, other than delivery of the golf club. So I'll spec his clubs out, and then I'll have him go through kind of a 9-iron, 6-iron, 4-iron test. And on your sheet, you can see what PGA Tour launch conditions are like. It's very important that, you got to understand that that is an average of 1,000 players. It's not definitely the optimum, but it's an average. There's guys that make $1 million playing above the average, and guys that make $1 million playing below the average. But in general, that's what the averages are. So I always kind of use that as my place to get to optimize a guy's ball flight. You're not going to get everybody there, but as long as they know where their shortcomings are, that's the important thing to do. So just to give you an idea, I'm going to hit, so you can visually see the difference between what is optimal and what is not optimal with irons. I've got kind of the two extremes where I have a higher launching soft shaft, lightweight graphite shafts in our this last year's rocket ball heads, and then I have our muscle back irons in a C taper shaft. C taper shafts came on the industry over the last year and a half, and they've been a shaft that have done a wonderful job with keeping spin down. Probably the lowest spinning shaft I've tested with players, even lower than Dynamic Gold X100s. So it's a good shaft option if you're fighting spin or you have a player that is low with his launch and spin conditions. So just to give you an idea, I'll hit a 9-iron here so that you can kind of see. Hopefully I can produce a lower than optimum spin rate with a pretty stock shaft. Couple for you. This muscle back looks like that for some.
Because the muscle back hasn't changed in 30 years.
So on your page you have the numbers of what kind of PGA Tour numbers are with the 9-iron being about 109 ball speed, 20 degrees launch, and kind of in the low 8,000s with spin. Give you an idea, those three, spin was about 44 and 4,600. So I had absolutely no spin on those balls. Launch angle or ball speed was about 102, 105, so just shy of tour average. Now obviously as you adjust and look at players, with ball speed being your primary measurement, you have to adjust launch and spin. It changes. Usually when you go to a slower ball speed type of player, you need more launch, you need more spin, and the opposite's true. So those numbers fluctuate. I have a great little program that allows me to plug in anybody's ball speed, and it will pretty much project what optimum numbers are with your launch, your spin, your descent angles, and your carry distance. It's a nice little program.
This ball's a little lower spin too, right?
Yeah.
Are those optimums based on real conditions from your tour averages, or those based on test conditions?
Those are based off of test conditions, off of real grass, normal conditions out there, thousands and thousands of golfers.
But okay,
Yeah.
they're In other words, they're
With
not
real-
based
with-
on like an Iron Byron swing test.
No, that's live player
They're
testing.
based on, okay.
Yeah, so that's not machine testing. So now let me take a completely opposite type of golf club.
And those two carried 137, 132. Both those two shells.
So here's a graphite 55-gram shaft, R-Flex, cavity back head. Lofts are a little stronger, so that's one thing to always pay attention to.
How'd that feel?
I found my new set of clubs.
143 carry. Ball speed was up to 106. Spin was 4,500.
You can see a higher launch. Obviously, that's the launch and the spin.
Now, interesting
Getting up
enough,
there.
remember, this is a club with a strong loft compared to that MB he was hitting, but it's got a soft shaft and weight very low, so we're still getting similar ball flight looking.
Yeah, and my spin's not changing dramatically on that shot. I mean, I'm still in the mid 4,000s. Once again, a low spin golf ball, but my carry distance has picked up 10 yards.
It could be your new set.
I know.
Getting old, you know.
All right, so let me hit some 6 irons. But what I'll do when I'm working with players is I'll pretty much, take a good sampling of 9 irons, 6 irons, and 4 irons, and really plot them out and see how they are, and then I'll make my adjustments off of that. So here's a 6 iron.
Nice twirl. You always recognize that tour player twirl. It's really fun. That was 178. Spin was 6,200. Seems weird.
A little spinning on that one.
Yeah.
And as you can tell, a good 6
178.
iron spin is just under 6,000 for tour ball speed. I'm not quite at tour ball speed. That was 124 miles per hour, and tour ball speed is 3 to 4 miles per hour faster than that. But when I'm fitting somebody, I'm very careful not to jump over into the instructional side of things and teaching side of things, although teaching and fitting go hand in hand, and you definitely have to understand golf swing fundamentals and principles to understand what's going on from a club fitting standpoint. But when I'm working with players, I want to really fit them to what I see. I'm not going to literally start giving the guys a lesson. These are good players, top playing club pros, top playing developmental tour guys, and I'm going to work with what I see that day or where they're going. That's the most important thing, is understanding their background, what they do, what types of shots they like to hit, how they're swinging, how they want to swing. That's probably one of the most important things in fitting, is to know who you're working with and where they're trying to get to. So it's pretty obvious that you can see higher launches.
178, pretty similar distance. All right, about 5,800 spin, and a little bit higher ball speed.
So not much difference. I can hit anything the same. And I'm probably one of the worst examples of that, where with certain players you can give them 2 different clubs and you'll see completely extreme differences, and probably a lot of you see that just with your personal fitting. But the important thing is just making sure that you get playable trajectories and proper spins and launch throughout the bag, and see the whole iron set. You might not have the options that I have. That's the big thing. A lot of the industry is just basically fitting off of 6 irons. So sometimes it's important to try to get a long iron to really determine what that breaking point is in the set before they work into their hybrids. Yeah, so that's kind of the thing on on good player fitting. When you get into drivers, like I was saying, driver fitting, we're all pretty comfortable with the numbers, but the most important thing to me is making sure that you're maximizing distance there, and making sure that you're maximizing the angle of descent and the rollout. I'll hit a couple different extremes on the drivers.
And while he's getting ready to hit some drivers, I'll pass around the driver. And we do the same thing on drivers that we do on the fairway woods. We try and thin out the crowns as much as possible. As you see inside, there's a lot of structure going on there. Drivers are very challenging to make. We're trying to make them sound good, last long, and have good properties, as well as give us weight to do other things with. Because we believe when you actually study some of the mat stuff from a player's swing type, and you do a cluster analysis on it, you find there's about 18 clusters of swing types. So it's really hard to decide which one of those you are without a mat system. So the challenge that we have from an equipment standpoint is we want to make the club as flexible as we can from an adjustment standpoint. Because we know, and we learned long ago, really this adjustability for us came out of the 300 series back in 2000. And we were trying to study all these different players and find out what the best driver was. And we found out we couldn't nail it down to one, so we did 3. And we had some smart engineer at the time, and it wasn't me, I won't take credit for it, but somebody said, why don't we just make one we can adjust? And everybody said, ooh, that's a good idea, but we can't do it. So it took us 3 years from that point to come up with an R7 that gave us great flexibility. And what we used to do on tour back then with the 300s and the 500s is we would make a head, and then we'd weight up the heel for some players, and we'd weight up the toe for other players, and the back for other players, and have all the different lofts. And when you got into the tooling of all that stuff, it became ridiculous in terms of the amount of energy and effort, not only from us, but from the standpoint of the player trying which one do you like. Because the player might get excited about the shape. Oh, I really like this one, but it might not fly right. So then he would say, give me that one that flies like this, where we'd have another club that would fly right, but he wouldn't like the shape. So it became a real nightmare. And to the point where in the 300 series, the 500 series, we were making 50 different tools to support the drivers on tour in play. And when we went to the R7, that dropped down to about 5 tools, most of those being the lofts. So it was a huge breakthrough in terms of adjustability, because we know that not one club fits every golfer. And as we've taken that with the modern products, now at the USGA, the one good thing we think the USGA did was open up the adjustability rule. So that allowed us to do a lot more things with the golf club and allow you to take one golf club or 2 golf clubs and fit most of your golfer population. So that's the excitement we've seen in the industry, and that's why we are a strong believer that adjustability is really the key between how you fit, what the golfer needs, and what you can deal with economically and commercially to make the best solution for the golfer. So that's why you see us continue to lead adjustability, and that's why that driver is always going to give us the most flexibility to fit the most golfers.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, I think we filled your heads with enough technology. Now let's talk a little bit more about the art. So with that, I'm going to bring up Mike, and he's got some nice information to share about his experiences and hopefully to make you all better instructors and teachers. So Mike, all yours. Thank you.
I'm going to hand this around, this box. I actually finally, after 35 years, got conned into writing a book. If you're interested, take one, look at it, whatever. What I found in instruction, one thing that I'm really big on, nobody's right, nobody's wrong. You know, I really struggle with our industry. There's so many ways to play golf. It's really interesting where everybody's trying to go to their little group and say, well, we've got all the answers or we've figured it out. Well, the reality of instruction in my life, I don't see too much that's new. I see some new packaging, some new verbiage for old concepts. A number of the different methods that are out there now that they put terms on. I worked with guys years ago that did almost exactly the same thing. They just called it something different. So our industry has a lot of people trying to showcase their talents, which I understand that, set themselves apart. Okay, but the reality is there's a lot of ways to do it. So what I've tried to do with like this book is not necessarily say this is how to do it, but talk about some things that regardless of what method you're involved in can potentially help you get your students a lot better. So that becomes a really big part, I think, of this teaching industry. The more information we can get from each other, that we can help these people enjoy the game more, and get them involved in it more, the better our jobs are. Now, from Jim's perspective, I know he couldn't be here. I would hope that all of you will, as Greg said earlier, say a prayer for him that he can get feeling better. I can tell you that almost every one of us sitting here today, Jim Flick, Bob Toski, and that original Golf Digest school, they made our professions what they are relative to what we make and what we do in golf instruction. Whether you agree or disagree with who they are and what they teach from a method perspective, what they've done for the game and our profession is phenomenal. So anytime you have an opportunity with any of these guys to tell them thanks, whatever, it means a lot to them because they put their whole life into it, as a lot of you have. Probably over my 23 years now of being involved with Flick, the biggest thing I learned from Jim relative to golf has very little to do with the game itself. It's his commitment level to every single person that was standing in front of him. It didn't matter whether it was Tom Lehman, Jack Nicklaus, or Mabel Schwartz, who was just starting golf out and didn't know which end to hold on to. His commitment to that student was exactly the same. I watched it day in and day out for 11, 12 years in golf school, seeing thousands of people, and he's like the frickin' Ever-Ready Bunny. I mean, I couldn't keep up with him. And every single person, he knew their names, he knew what was going on, he was quick to give them compliments when they needed it. He was also not afraid to say, well, what's this little pity party you got going on here? You seem to think that you're more privileged than everybody else, that you're going to learn this game, so you think you can buy a game, inherit a game. No, you can't. Anybody who's any good in this game's earned the right to be there. It's a marvelous game. We have, all of us have a huge potential to affect people's lives because the game can do that to them. You know, so, but they've got to earn it. They've got to be able to spend the time with it. So hopefully what I can do today is maybe give you some ideas so that when we get into all of this, they spend the time on the things that are going to be most valuable to them. Now, all of the information these guys have given, I mean, this is phenomenal stuff. The science of what's out there is incredible. But at the same time, you got to be a little careful with science because you can overfeed people information. And I was also very fortunate when I was first really started playing a lot. I ran into a guy by the name of Joe Nichols. Now, I don't know how many of you know him, but there's a couple of companies out there which I went and they came over to my house and showed my daughter how to hit a golf ball. And they said, we've come up with a drill that'll really help you to hit the ball better. So we want you to hit the ball and pull the club back. And we've come up with this drill to help the acceleration and deceleration patterns in your swing. Now, I have a question. That particular drill that you've come up with, I had a guy having me do that in late 1970s, so I'm not sure you've come up with that. So let's be careful about saying what you've come up with. All right, so the reality of this game, it's about this club face and a golf ball. So when I start with people, no, look, it's my club face. There we go. Here's the deal. We assume levels of competency that these people don't have. And I'm talking even some pretty good players. So the first thing I start with people is like, okay, here's the game. Club face, ball. It's make the club face run into the ball on a path with the face in a position to control the spin and the trajectory on it to get it to go where you want it to go. Okay? Pretty good, right? So then I say, all right, here's how you hold the club face in your hand. So I put it in their right hand, so they hold it. I say, all right, now, take loft off the face. Add loft. Hit it left, hit it right. Do the same thing with their left hand. Hold it right here. Take loft off, add loft, hit it left, hit it right. Take your thumb and stick it out. Now you're holding that face. Low, high, left, right. Right here. Here's the game. Now this plays a big part in it, but here's the game. Most people, we assume that they understand what this face is, to how to control this face. Now this game is very confusing because you got this long shaft with this club head down here, and you got a round grip. And people take a hold of that round grip, they have no idea the relevance to that face. When I'm hitting a shot, and I'm sure a lot of you, they're players, I don't feel a round grip. I feel this. So once I put this in people's hands, and I start to show them how to use their hands to control the face, and then you set them up to the ball and you say, okay, now take the club face and run the club face into the ball. It's amazing how much better they get right there. Because now they have a sense of the face and what they're trying to do with it. Now, I don't know how many of you have tried that with people, but I would suggest you try it, because we assume levels of competency that they don't have. And one of the big problems that I found in my teaching is the same thing, assuming somebody knows something. And so I go to the next step. Here's where a lot of the tour information is really scary. It's not that it's wrong. There's none of this stuff that's wrong. Just where does it fit in the learning curve or the priority list of the person who's listening to the information? You take these tour players, you can do pretty much anything you want them to do with their bodies, with whatever. They can put the friggin' club face back on the ball. Half the people that we work with aren't even sure that they have arms that come out of their bodies, let alone they have any control of face. You know, they're like this. And so it's not that the information is wrong. You just have to start to ascertain, who are you dealing with athletically? What is their background? What can they and can't they do? Because if you go down a road of trying to get them to do something that in theory is better, but it doesn't fit where they are either physically, emotionally, or time constraints, it's a train wreck. Nicholas made a comment. Jim more than myself, but I certainly have been able to spend a lot of time around Jack over the last 20 some odd years working for him. We asked him to define golf. Here's what he said. Golf is a game of emotion and adjustments. And it's being able to read yourself, both physically and mentally, at any point in time to pick the right shot to get the most out of your game. Now, Jack's the type that he just comes up with this stuff. And then you ask him, what did you say? He has no idea what he said. But it's profound. So Jim and I spent, I don't know how much time trying to put that whole thing back together, asking, is this right? Is in Jack, I don't know. You heard me the first time. So it's just one of those deals where you go, okay. Well, we finally got it. Now, I took that, and for the Nicholas Academies, for our instructors, I turned it into a mission statement, but here's what I did with it. Golf instruction is a profession of emotion and adjustments. And it's being able to read your student, both physically and mentally, at any point in time in the learning curve, to figure out the best information for them to get the most out of their game and time commitment to it. That's what we're about. So when we start talking tour averages, nice. It's good to have. Does it fit the individual person you're working with? May or may not. We were talking about hip angles. I'm going to start getting a little into the physical side of a few things here, and then I'll have you stand up. We'll do a couple of things. Having been in the fitness industry now for a long time, believe me, there's nobody who believes in being in shape and understanding the value of range of motion and function more than I do. However, I just was able to speak at the World Golf Fitness Summit, and I've always been a bit of a rebel relative to a lot of things. For instance, when I started really teaching, we made a presentation, myself and Pete Agostiu, to the PGA of America. This is back in 1990. We put this program together. It took us about 4 years. We started in '86. It was called the Swing Game. Basically, it developed junior golfers. They started in kindergarten doing movement patterns, exercises, throwing frisbees, throwing footballs, rolling on the ground both directions, all kinds of things. They didn't touch a golf club until they got to 6th grade. When they got to 6th grade, then they started into golf, and golf became the evaluator of their function. Golf is one of the best evaluators of physical function. It's not the best developer. It's not. Okay? So when I see a lot of these kids and I see a lot of these young parents, little Johnny's 8, he's going to play the tour. Really? Johnny knows he's going to be a tour golfer. He's 8. That's mom and dad. It's not Johnny. I didn't know I was going to play golf until I was a freshman in college. Okay, so I'm not sure that this whole thing, this specialization, when you look at it from physiologically, it's terrible. Okay, these kids and people in general, they should be out running, jumping, twisting. Titleist Performance, their junior golf program, if you haven't seen it, that's basically what we did for the PGA in 1986. You ought to take a look at it, because that's how those people over there, that's how most of these people should be coming into golf, because you teach them how to move. You teach them hand-eye coordination skills before they ever get to golf, because that plays big time into how good they're going to get. So here was our presentation. There's the best technology you can buy right there. Go. What the hell's wrong? Hit it. Okay. So what you mean then, what you're telling me, is that what attaches itself to this to make it go is fairly important. Maybe you might want to know something about this. It's incredible to me how little people know about how the body reacts to forces and how it moves. Yet we know everything we need to know about this shaft, where it flexes and what kind of graphite it is, how it's wound and what this head, how it's put together. You know more about this than you know about that person that you're standing in front of, that you're trying to teach how to use this. This is twofold. It's making sure this fits them and making sure the way they're trying to use this maximizes or optimizes their ability to make this work. That's the whole deal. Okay? Now, Greg was talking earlier about maximizing things or efficiency. The reason I say it's important to have a launch monitor, most people want to hit the ball further. How many of you have students who want to hit it further? I mean, almost every single one of them. The majority of people who hit the ball, the reason they don't hit it very far is because they can't make the club face run into the ball square. So, you know, I mean, it slices and it goes out there, whatever it is, and they go, I don't only hit it 220, 230. I want to hit it further. Well, if we put that on that launch monitor and we looked at club head speed relative to smash factor, that's not very efficient. So if your club head speed's 100 miles an hour and your ball speed's 125, 127, the ball's going 220, do you need more speed or do you need to be more efficient with the speed you already have? More efficient. People are trying to do all this stuff with their bodies that says, I want more speed. Well, that speed's only going to help you if you can control it. Now, we can do a lot with you with fittings. They can, a tremendous amount with people, to take very inefficient moves and make them much, much better. However, as teachers, it's our job to get people as efficient as they can be with who they are. Okay, so it's a big deal here. People's sense of, I don't hit it far enough, is a function of they don't hit it solid. They can't hit it in the center of the face. Their pass off, their face is off. Most of them, you ask them what they're doing, it has nothing to do with controlling the club or the face or the path. It's how much their hips are firing or where their weight shift is going. Now, I'm not saying that's not important, but as a first priority, you better be careful with that one. So we get a lot of people standing there trying to make their bodies move in a manner that's getting in the way of their ability to use this. The game is really a number of things. Your eyes see what you want to have happen. Your hands and arms control the club face and the path, and your feet and your body assist in making that happen. Now, if any one of those don't match out, you're in trouble. Most people misuse their bodies and have no control of the club. Other than that, they're great. You know, I tell people all the time, there's no question you have talent. Because if I set up the way you do and swung the way you do at it, I don't think I could even get the club face to the ball. So the fact that you find the ball with the face is a freaking miracle. So if we just make you a little more efficient, you're going to be so much better because you don't have to use all your talent to just not hurt yourself. And they look at you. That's another thing Flick taught me, is you have to be able to politely insult people. So when they walk away, they're going, I'm not sure, was that a compliment? Okay. So we're taking the game up, and we're going down this road of assumptions about people. One thing I told you a little earlier about these camera angles, I could just bust this club to think how many hours I spent trying to fix my swing when it wasn't broken. It was the damn camera angle that was off. Now, so you got to be careful about where you take people and what is better. That whole word, better. We're going to get you better. We're going to get your hips moving better. Okay? Maybe that might help, it might not. Relative to physiology, just for a minute here, I want you to think about this. Here's your shoulders, and here's your hips. They ideally work in parallel planes. Now, if all of a sudden you're bent here to hit a golf ball, and you take your backswing and you start into the ball and your hips come up and your shoulders go down, and those two lines intersect real quickly, you have in your lower lumbar spine now so much force that you've almost guaranteed yourself a lower lumbar spine injury. So I see these articles. All right, here's the key. Rory McIlroy. The reason he hits it so far is because his hips unwind faster and further than anybody else's on tour. Okay. Next day, I see my members out there trying to go with their hips. Can't hit the ball. Hips are moving faster. They can't find the ball. And what happens? If they don't have the flexibility or the strength to be able to handle that, and this starts to happen, low back, shoulder and neck. Now, I look at a lot of the tour players, and guess what they're doing? They swing, they come into it, hips come up, shoulders go down. A lot of that's because of what they're teaching us now, how to create more speed. Okay, speed isn't necessarily, in my opinion, the most important thing. Just because you know physiologically how to generate speed, guess what the opposite side of speed is? Your ability to control deceleration. If you control speed and you just go faster, it's not necessarily going to make you better. In fact, you might have a train wreck with more speed. Because if your body doesn't have the ability to handle the deceleration side of it, you're going to get hurt. So we got these tour players who are like this. One of the reasons they survive is because they work out all the time. So they've got enough control and stability that they can deal with that. Most of our people we're working with, they start getting those lines conversion like that, good luck. That's a lower back injury waiting to happen. So you got to be really careful about what you start giving people relative to what the tour is doing, relative to what the individual person can do. There are a number of things that an average person with limited flexibility can do like the tour players. Impact. They can get their right arm on the back of the shaft. They can get their arms in the same position. Their body's not going to be the same. It doesn't matter. They don't have to be. There's a lot of good tour players who would impact, their hips and their shoulders are about the same position. There's some that are open, some are more than that. Which one's right? Depends. Depends on the individual person. Now, where I see golf going, here's the tour now. How much money's out there? It's unbelievable. If these guys can have 5 or 6 really good years, not even really good, just good years, stay in the top 125 for 5 or 6 years, you're a multi-millionaire. You don't have to work anymore. You're done. So this is no longer about a long career. It's not about longevity. It's about upfront, fast, get as far as you can, do as good as you can. And when I break down, I'm done anyway. Got all the money I need. I'll go do something else. So some of the information now that we're getting from the fitness industry is about how the body generates more and more speed. Okay, great. What relevance does that have to this over here? Probably not a lot. Does it make sense? Okay, so what are the things that we need to look at in people? I call it some of its athletic personality. John, come up here. You're on the front row. No, it's a good seat. No, here you go. Just take the ball. Just throw it to the end of the tee. Yeah. Okay. Throw a little further. Now, if you know what you're looking for, okay, throw it again. Yeah, a little further. Don't hurt yourself. Okay, now, come on up here. Yeah.
Throw your arm out, John.
No, come on up here. No. Well, that's okay. That's okay. Stay there, John. All right. Just you can have a couple. You don't have to throw very far. All right. Throw another one. A lot better. Okay, that's far enough. Now, what I want you to watch when he throws, watch his hip to his shoulder relationship when he throws. Okay? Throw it again for him. They move together, don't they? Throw it. Watch his hip. What do his hips do?
Started first.
Okay. Now, that's his basic personality for movement. That's how he reacts to throw or hit. That's how his body sequences that motion. So we start looking at get the hips to clear a little faster, whatever. Okay, John can handle some of that. No freaking prayer. And if he tries to do it, what's going to happen? If he tries to make his hips go faster, his shoulders, because he can't hold them back, are going to go right with him. And then you're going to say, no. Make your hips go, but hold your shoulders in there. And so then to do that, his hips come up and he's here, and then you're boom, lower back injury. I'll tell you what, you can play pretty damn good with your hips and your shoulders moving through there at about the same speed. There's a lot of speed producers in a golf swing. A lot of speed producers. There's about 7 of them. Okay? It's what people have the maximum access to. Now I'll just use myself as an example because I like to always use me to beat up on. This summer, I play every year in a few tournaments, and I keep playing because I think it's important as PGA golf professionals for us to stay involved in the game. When you just stand on a lesson tee and you just teach, you can get really distorted as to what you think is going to work and what won't work. When you have to stand there and aim it at a target, and you're going to have to post a score, game changes. Okay, all of a sudden what you thought would happen or what should work doesn't work. Now what do you do? All right, so this summer I've got 2 herniated discs in my lower back. I've had them since I was 20. Now I've exercised my way out of them most of my life. They're starting to catch up. I'm almost 60, and this summer, uh-oh. Now I'm going to play in these tournaments. All of a sudden, So I had to figure out how to play and take out one of those movement patterns. I still had access to a lot of others. I went out and played, almost won the Utah Open, almost won our section championship, and virtually couldn't separate my lower body from my upper body. So is that a prerequisite for playing golf well? No. It can help, but it's not a prerequisite. Can you get the club face on the ball and make the ball go where you want it to go? It's fairly important. The better the equipment, the easier it is to make the ball go where you want it if you've got control of the club. So it becomes a big deal, this control of the club thing. More athletic personality. Baseball. How many think baseball has relevance to golf? You know, I had a guy show up the other day with his son, and I said, well, what does little Johnny do? He's 14. I used to play baseball. Okay, used to. Yeah, I don't want him playing baseball anymore because I told him to forget everything he's learned in baseball because it has no relevance to his golf swing. It's terrible for it. I went, really? Okay. So, baseball, baseball is played here. I spend a lot of time playing this game. One of the biggest reasons that baseball is a little different is because when you run the club into the ball, there's not a lot of forearm rotation. But guess what? If you had a fairly strong grip with a fairly shut face, and you used the same stuff that you used to play baseball, which is how I started, you can play pretty damn good. Don't tell me golf, baseball doesn't relate. It plays right into it. Release pattern's a little different. But how your body moves and how you sequence is very similar. All right, let's talk about that kinesthetic chain. You're all hearing about this now, how important this kinesthetic chain is, and the X factor, and the fact that if you can separate this more from this, that's going to give you more speed or power. Okay. Your body's like a coiled spring. Really? Okay. So the more tighter you wind it up, the faster it unwinds. Guess what? Muscles don't react like springs. When you tighten muscles, they move slower, not faster. So all this coil up and let it go stuff is overrated. Most of these guys who have a lot of X factor don't have a lot of tension. So the people we're working with, they start trying to turn their shoulders, not move their hips. All you've done is created tension. I mean, Tiger and those guys, half of them stand there, they can wind up. I mean, I can still wind up to 90-degree shoulder turn and virtually no hip turn, because I'm still really flexible in my mid-thoracic back. Why? I spend a lot of time practicing, working on it. Plus, I've been playing sports, baseball, golf, my entire life. Tour players are physically dysfunctional human beings. They're dysfunctional. And we're using them as models. Some of it I understand. It's a nice place to start, but you got to understand, relative to the people we're working with, it might not be the best model to look at. In fact, what do they say about the tour players? There's guys on this end of it and on this end of it that play really well. Well, most of the people you're working with would do better looking at the people on this end and this end if they're trying to copy a model. Now, if they just want general information, okay, that's different. The general information, you tend to want you do this, we can help you a little more, go this direction, fine. How much do they go? Kinesthetic sequence. Golf swing, every athletic event we're involved in comes from the ground up. Every single one of them. Okay, so if I get to the top of my swing and I start down, I mean, when I start down, my lower body starts to go before this goes. As it starts to go, pretty soon it gets to a point where it hands off that force from my feet to my knees. Then it gets into my hips. Then my hips start to rotate. My hips have to rotate just enough to create enough torque in my mid-thoracic back to start to make my shoulders unwind. Okay? Then my shoulder starts, so it goes feet, knees, hips, mid-thoracic back, shoulders. Then your arms start. Then this is slowed down, this is slowed down, this has almost come to a stop, and that takes off. Everybody's the same in that chain. However, how much each one of those has to happen before it affects the next one is very, very different. His kinesthetic chain and John's are going to be totally off, totally different. Because the amount of rotation he needs in his hips to get into his mid-back to create his shoulders to move them is minimal. Yours is quite a bit. So again, it starts to come down to the better we can evaluate the people that are in front of us, the better we can utilize the information that we now have to give them the best information for them to get the most out of the game. Think about the tour players. I get kids all the time that come out and they want to look at their swings on the video. That's the first thing they want. Swing has become a reason for not playing well. I got to cross the line at the top. They go, really? Is that good? Bad? I don't like it. Really? Okay. Why don't you like it? I just don't like it. Okay. So let me show you some swings here. You just tell me when you see somebody who's got a better swing than yours. Tell me when you see someone. Now, I keep bringing up guys who've won major tour events, major championships, and they keep picking their swing over the tour guys. Now, they're not the classic swings. You know, there's this Furyk's and some of those guys, but I bring them up. And after about 6 of them, I say, I have a question for you. I've shown you your swing over these tour players, and you've picked your swing consistently, that you'd rather have your swing than theirs. Why haven't you won a tour event or a frickin' major? You don't have any kahunas. That's the deal. You haven't figured out how to play. You're searching for this magic bullet that says, oh, blue skies, bluebirds. Stand there, take a deep breath, relax. Go to your quiet place. Take a swing. The ball goes to the target, and the world is beautiful. Where is that frickin' world? I never found it. I mean, I've played in major championships. I've won section events. I was an All-American. I never found that place. You know, I tried to go there, and I'd go there, and I couldn't find my golf ball after I went there. And I drug induced, whatever. I mean, I had a nice day, but I played terrible. So what is that all about? I mean, the game tests you on a daily basis. The last thing we want to do is test people with things they can't do. All right, let's have everybody stand up for a minute. How much time do I have?
As much as you want. Hour and a half.
As much as I want. Don't. These guys know you do not want to go there with me.
We're scheduled till 4:30, so you got an hour and a half.
Okay. All right, here's the deal. I want all of you to stand on one foot. Okay? Just stand on one foot. If you can. If you can't, then you're done right now. Put your arms out to your sides. Comes another little adjustment here. Arms out to your sides. Now, if you can actually hold yourself there, fixate your eyes on something, on me maybe, whatever. And then what I want you to do now is with your eyes fixated on me, move your head back and forth and don't move your eyes. So keep your eyes on me and move your head. And what happens, what are most of you doing? You start to fall, don't you? Okay, go to the other foot and do it. So you're on the other foot, see if you can get your balance. Now, did you notice you're better balanced on one foot than the other one? That's the side you're going to tend to want to go to under pressure, by the way. All right, so now your eyes are focused. Now move your head back and forth really fast. What happens? Most all of you are on your butt right now. Okay, how many of you teach balance to your students? Balance is pretty important, isn't it? Okay, balance has 4 systems involved in it. You have mobility, you have strength, you have flexibility or proprioception. That's how the joints react to motion. And the last one is vestibular. That's how your eyes and your inner ear react to the horizon. That's the #1 key in balance, because that's what triggers the brain to tell you where you are in space and time. So if your vestibular system's off, you can do all of the unstable surface, all the strength, all the flexibility you want to do, and you stand out there and you start to swing and your head starts to move and your eyes are fixated on the ball and your brain goes, whoa. It's like you're trying to hit a ball on a moving ship. And somebody says, come on, your balance is off. You're about to throw up. Okay, so now the good part about the vestibular system, you can recalibrate it very quickly. The fitness industry doesn't even talk about that. What do they want you to do? Get stronger. It's important, but it's only part of the puzzle. Does that make sense? Okay, all of you, while you're standing there, just get yourself nice and relaxed, whatever's relaxed. Okay, so you take your normal stance, nice and relaxed. I want you to look down at your feet. I want you to tell me 2 things. 1, are your knees directly over your feet, or are they slightly inside of them? Some are inside, some are right over, aren't they? Okay? When you look at your feet, has one foot turned out more than the other one? Guess what? That's usually your most dysfunctional hip. So that hip doesn't want to accept weight, so it starts doing this. When I watch people walk up to me, all I've got to see is watch them take their clubs out of the cart, walk up, set their clubs down. As soon as I see their gait pattern, I can pretty much tell what side they're going to hang out on, how they're going to move, what kind of flexibility they have, because I can see it in their feet and in their gait pattern. Okay? So if you look down at your feet and you got one foot turned out like this, that hip is not going to want to accept weight. So you're going to tend to hang out up here on this foot. Is that bad? Maybe not. There's a method that's where they want you to hang out all the time. That's what they teach. So maybe for somebody who has a dysfunctional right hip, that might be a good method for them, because they don't want you load bearing too much into this hip. So again, hello.
What if you got both feet turned out?
Well, if you got both feet turned out, you're in a world of hurt.
You're a
So
duck.
if you walk like a duck and you talk like a duck, you're probably a duck. No, the reality is if you're this, which there are a few tour players that look like that, and most of them swing like they just twist, because they don't, either hip really likes weight, so they don't have a lot of lateral motion in their swings because their hips aren't strong enough to handle it. So if both feet are turned out, you're going to tend to just sit there and twist. Neither side really wants to accept weight. Does that make sense? Okay, so just by watching somebody walk and you have somebody throw a ball, you're already starting to figure out what you're dealing with. Make sense? Okay, again, I hope that what I can do today is give you more and more ideas about how to look at people, so that when you start working with them, maybe you understand why they do some of the things they do, and you can start to figure out how to help them. Now, if they're willing to get in an exercise program, that's going to help everybody. That's what I started with. When I learned this information, I would see everybody, and you come and take a lesson, I'd look at you and I'd go, okay, knees are in, hips are a little rotated, upper body's twisted, okay, I got to stabilize that. So this is what I'm thinking. You get up, make a swing, okay, I know why she does that. I'm going to give you a couple things to work on. I'm going to give you your exercise program. So next time you come, we're going to evaluate your exercises, see where you're at, and we're going to move you along through this process. Sounds really good, doesn't it? Problem is, my lesson book went like this. Why? Because she goes home, she looks at her 8, 9, 10 exercise she's supposed to do. Life gets in her way, doesn't do them. It's time for our next lesson. I get a call. Hey, Mike, sorry I can't make it in today. I've got to go. Emergency came up. Now, she knows that if she comes in and I go, well, okay, well, we're the same place we were. People don't want to hear that. Okay? So being able to evaluate somebody, let me show you something that hurt me big time. I'm going to leave you standing because you've all been sitting so long. All right, I want you to look at my knees. Where are my knees relative to my feet?
Inside them.
They're way inside my feet, aren't they? When I started golf, I came out of baseball. When I hit the golf ball, I went way out to the outside of this left foot. Okay? Well, the first group I got with, they were the ones who also showed me that my swing is off, and it wasn't off. They also said, you can't do that with your left foot. You have to platform your left foot, so we want it to finish this way. Okay? So now, if your knee is way inside your foot, and you have to leave that foot platform, there's no way I can get my knee and my hip up over that foot. Because if I do, what does my foot do? Rolls out. Physically, I mean, I could break my knee and not do it, but I can't get there. So now I'm trying to make sure my foot stays stable. Okay, well, if that's what I'm supposed to do, the only way I could do it is this would stop and this would go. Now what am I? I'm freaking over the top of everything. Never been over the top in my entire life. Now I'm standing there, and every swing I make, I'm going like this. I'm going, what is that? They said, well, you're just over it. Now shallow it out. Can you help me with this? I'm struggling. Well, no, you just shallow it out. Platform shallow. Shallow. So then pretty soon I'm, doing some really weird stuff. So what I have to do to be able to get my left hip up over my left foot, this foot has to roll out. I physically can't keep that foot flat and it just doesn't work. So when you start looking at people and you start trying to get them into comparing them to tour positions, you got to look at them and say, all right, structurally, here's what we got. All right, if you're going to move, we got to get that hip over that left foot, which most everybody who's any good does. A few don't now, but come on here so they can see you. You don't mind this, I'm sure. She's even actually what's your name?
Jane.
Jane's better than I am. Okay, you see where her knee is? You see where her foot is? Mm-hmm. Okay, for her to get this knee over that foot and to get her hip, that foot's got to do that. Now, if you look at her and say, well, no, let's keep your foot flat, but let's help you get your weight over to your left side. Her brain's going, whoa, sorry, I got a problem here. It's not computing. You want me to get to my left side, but you don't want my foot to go out. And she says, oh, what's happened? A lot of tour players out here. There's other tour players. They're just like this. A lot of it, some of it, structural. You get somebody who's bull-legged slightly, they can stand there and They can give you all the, get their left hip up and do all this, foot stays flat on the ground, looks wonderful. But if structurally you don't have the right system, and you're matching it to a different system, you're not comparing apples to apples here. Make sense?
Yeah.
All right, go ahead, have a seat. I need water. Am I hurting any of your opinions of teaching or what you're doing?
No. Good.
Reinforcing.
Great.
Reinforcing. Okay. Let me borrow a chair.
Like when you watch somebody walk or whatever and tell what kind of grip they need.
What kind of grip? Yeah, I can.
I think you want it
Yeah, you're.
this way or this way.
Yeah, that's a gait pattern. I look at arms. It's interesting when people tell me, well, if you're going to match grip. Now, grip, okay, there's a lot of release patterns. How you put your hands on the club relative to who you are physically and the ball flight you're trying to hit turn into different types of release patterns or movement patterns, okay? So there's a lot of things going on. There's rules that fit every different type of swing. There's a lot of ways to do it, okay? If you stand, seeing as you asked, everybody stand nice and tall. Let your arms hang to your sides. Now, this is not where you play golf from, so we're not going to see what your grip should be from here, because it doesn't make any sense to grip it here. I want you to bend from your hips and let your arms hang in front of you. Just let them hang. You're not holding the golf club, just let them hang. Where's the back of your left hand pointed? This way? Relax your arm. Just relax it. You're not holding it right out this way. This way. This way. Up here. Okay. Most all of you, me included, here's my, I'll use me again as an example. Here's when I let my arms hang in front of me, there's how my left arm hangs, okay? So when I hold this golf club, a neutral grip for me is a grip that reflects how my arm hangs in front of me naturally relative to what's going to happen when I swing. So when I swing, I want the momentum of the weight of that club doing as much work for me as it possibly can. So my grip to be neutral, to square the face, needs to be relative to golf terminology, strong. It's not strong for me, it's strong relative to golf terminology. Now this old, put your palms together, slide them apart, hold it, that works, that's a neutral grip for about 1 in 1,000 people. The other 999 of them, you've turned them into slicers. Okay, because from there, they're going to have to do something, either with the face or their arms to square the face. Now, when I came, my first lesson I took, mind you, I was a college All-American at this point. I'd won our state open. I had a 10-finger baseball grip. And golf to me was nothing more than a low outside pitch in baseball. And I just hit a little draw out there. I go, easy game. Ball doesn't move. How can this be hard? Well, I don't understand what's so hard about it. Guy watches me swing. Well, Mike, you got to tell you something. You got a bad grip and poor ball flight. Okay. The first thing we got to do is we got to get you out of this 10-finger grip. So I went here. Okay? That in and of itself wouldn't have been that big a deal. Okay? All that does is it gets your hands more together and they work more as a unit. But then he said, your left hand is way too strong. We got to get you into a neutral palms opposing grip. Okay. So now every ball that went out there and drew about 5 or 10 yards, he says, now take that grip and make me a swing. He goes, that's okay, your grip's good, your timing's off. About 17 years later, I figured out the grip thing. Because I worked my ass off to make that grip and some other things work. And I got to where I was pretty good at it. Good enough to get to the finals of the tour school, good enough to play in a U.S. Open, good enough to do a lot of things with it. But under pressure, when I really had to go, I couldn't let it go. So I had to make sure something bad didn't happen. And so it handicapped my ability to play at that high level because I couldn't do what instinctively I wanted to do. tell you, there's a couple of guys right now that are really pretty good players who are fighting their natural instincts to move, and I'm not sure they're ever going to fix. Because I don't think they're ever going to be as good as they could be, because they're saying, I don't care who I am athletically, I'm going to do something different under pressure. And when it gets really tough, and everybody's got a choke level, believe me. Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, everybody has a point where they go, the bluebirds go away and the demons come out. We all have that. Well, when those demons show up, and they, instead of being birds, they have fangs, what happens? When the ball starts going crooked, now you're in trouble. Okay, so that grip on me, changing that grip from, now the putting this would not have been bad, but moving my left hand from here to there, I'd never experienced, I wouldn't say never, hardly ever experienced swinging and hitting a ball and wanting it to go this way and having it go that way. The old double cross. I mean, to that point in golf, I hadn't experienced that too much. So I would aim it over canyons. I don't care, it's going to hook. Just aim it, hit it. Where's the pin? I just hit it, hooked right in there. Ball stayed still. Easy game. All of a sudden, under pressure, a couple of them went in the canyon. Now I'm going, alrighty. I'm aiming over here somewhere. So if I miss, doesn't go in the canyon. Okay, so what happened? I couldn't get it close to the hole anymore. I didn't have a pattern. Swing was better, looked better on a video. Grip was perfect. I couldn't play. Couldn't play. And everybody says, well, why didn't you go back to what you had? I didn't know what I had. Me, personally. I was a kid playing a sport. I learned to play golf, and I'm going to show you in a minute here because it plays into some misconceptions that I want you all to understand relative to this game that have helped me dramatically. I'm not going to say I've figured them out, but I had some visual concepts early, and I can tell you almost every single person that I ask this to that we're trying to teach doesn't know what they're doing. And the reason they don't is because they've seen pictures from a damn camera, and it's taken, and there's the camera, or there's the camera, and somebody's making a swing, and they're looking at that picture trying to figure out from here how to turn this into that. There's two different worlds. They're not parallel universes here. So golf gods are throwing you a curveball. Go ahead, look at all you want to there. But if you don't know what you're doing up here to make that look right, you can spend your life trying to make positions show up. That's not why they're there. See, physics lies. Golf swings lie. Positions lie. Anytime you take a motion activity and you stop it down and you look at a position, there's a lot of forces going on to make that position work. Now, if you don't know what they are and you work on the position, you just ruined yourself. Because the position happens because of a lot of things, not just that one spot. Okay, everybody have a seat again. All right.
Hey, Mike, can I ask a question?
You can ask all the questions you want.
If you ask someone you've never worked with before, and you've analyzed them when they got out of the car and saw how they walked and all that kind of stuff,
Yeah.
and you ask them to hit a few balls,
Yeah.
what are you going to let them do? Whatever's natural for them?
At first, yeah, I just see what they do. You know, I watch how they move. I watch how they swing. Most people, I take them on the golf course. I want to see what they're doing on the course. I want to make them nervous, put them on there with the target and see what they do. Because I have to try to figure out what's the most important thing for them relative to what they do under pressure. I mean, I spent my life out here on the drive. I can do almost anything you want me to do on a driving range. But when I have to go tee it up on the first hole, there's out of bounds left, water, or out of bounds left, wind blowing left to right, dog leg left, hazards over here. That's another world. I don't care how much you say, just look here and go to your quiet place. It isn't happening. Everybody I've talked to, Jack included, that doesn't happen. So odds are if it doesn't happen for him, he has a different way of looking at it. That's not it. He doesn't go to his quiet place. He wants to have that anxiousness, that nervousness. That's what allows him to get to a level of consciousness he can't get to otherwise. So it allows him to feel and sense things more precisely than he could otherwise. Different way to look at it. Well, that's why Jack's Jack. We're all sitting around here doing
Are
our
you,
deal.
Mike, and are you gonna ask him to try to figure out, what he's aware of?
Jack?
No, I'm talking about this player that I was asking about a while ago, the guy you've never seen before.
Well,
He
I
doesn't
asked-
know what he's doing because he's not aware of what he's doing.
Well, I ask him, what are you trying to do? Watch their ball flight. What makes that happen? So I go down that road with them. And then, some of them we look at on the, I don't use video that much. I put it there. What this does, this technology is great because it reinforces what you want people to know. They believe technology. If that launch monitor says they're hitting it better, they'll keep doing it. If you just tell them they're hitting it better, they may not do it because they don't trust you. They'll trust that computer though, because their numbers are better. So there's a blend for all of this. It's not just one or the other. So the individual guy, I want to know what you're thinking. The kids that I work with, I want to know what they're thinking when they're playing. And the first thing I tell them is, everything's okay. Because you probably think you're choking and you're terrible and you're falling apart. Nobody's ever done that. The reality is everybody does it. They just learn how to deal with it. So the fact that you're going through that, you're just a normal person trying to play this game. So let's figure out what's going to work for you under pressure, mentally and physically.
So he won't really know how to make any changes until he's aware of what he's doing.
No, you're right. You're right. They have to feel the difference, which I'll talk to you in a minute about exaggerations. Okay, so when somebody sits in a chair and they hit a ball, okay, there's a number of skills that I have people do. Now, I've had guys tell me, well, no, you're still using your lower body. Sure I am. You have to have contact with the ground. No question. Am I saying there that everything you do is hands and arms? No. But there's an ability that all good players have to make their hands and arms go faster than their center. Contrary to popular belief, once your shoulders and your body start, they don't keep going. They actually slow down, and this goes. All right, so to get people to feel what it feels like to make the club go past them is a big deal.